My name is Evelyn. I'm 36. And at my brother's MBA celebration, Mom lifted her glass and announced, Paige will pay his $120,000 tuition. She doesn't have kids. She said it like my life had left an unused line in the family budget. Around the table, relatives nodded. My brother didn't look surprised. He looked at me with the calm expectation of someone waiting for a transfer he had already spent. No, I said. The room went silent. Mom's smile hardened. Dad stared at the table. My brother asked if I was really going to humiliate him over money. I remembered the rent I had covered when he quit his first job, the car payment he had called temporary, and the credit card balance Mom promised he would repay. He never did. In that moment, I didn't feel like a sister. I felt like a reserve account they had finally decided to empty. When I stood to leave, my brother held my gaze as if I had stolen something from him. For 2 weeks, my family stopped speaking to me. Then, an unknown number appeared on my phone. A professor from my brother's business school introduced himself and said, I'm not calling about tuition. Your brother received a venture scholarship for his final business plan. I need to know why the original file lists you as the author. My hand shook. Before I could answer, Mom texted, Pick up the phone. My brother called once, twice, then 7 times without leaving a message. By midnight, I knew the name in that file was not a clerical error. What I didn't know was how many people at that celebration already knew where the plan had come from, or what they would ask me to do once the school started asking questions. Before I tell you what that professor found and what happened when my family was finally forced to answer for it, tell me what time it is where you are and where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. My brother's name was Ethan, and at 29, he had mastered the art of turning other people's patience into his safety net. Our mother, Diane, called him a late bloomer. Our father, Mark, preferred entrepreneurial. I called him my brother because for years that word had been enough to make me ignore the pattern. When Ethan left a sales job after 6 weeks, I paid 2 months of his rent. When his car was nearly repossessed, I covered the balance after he promised to repay me from his next commission. He sent $200, then bought a new phone. Later, $3,000 for a certification course. Became a trip with his girlfriend, Claire. Every rescue came with the same explanation. Ethan was finding himself. I was already established. That was why the MBA announcement bothered me before Mom mentioned tuition. Ethan had not told me he was applying or asked for advice, even though I ran an operations consultancy and had spent 12 years building financial models. Yet everyone else knew he had been admitted to Westbridge School of Management and selected for a conditional venture fellowship. Mom called it proof that he had already paid his own way, although it covered $30,000 and depended on his project remaining eligible. The remaining tuition and required residency costs approached $120,000. Their solution was me. The morning after I refused, Ethan sent one private message. You made me look like a beggar in front of Claire. He did not say I had hurt him. He said I had damaged the image he had built. An hour later, he tagged me in a polished post announcing his admission. Grateful for the family members who understand that belief requires sacrifice. He wrote beneath a photograph of himself holding a Westbridge folder. Because my name was attached, relatives and friends congratulated both of us. Anyone reading it would assume I was proud to finance him. I removed the tag without commenting. Mom called that evening, but she did not begin with hello. You have the money. Having money and owing it to Ethan are different things. You don't have children, Paige. What are you saving it for? The question landed harder than I expected. I had spent years being careful because no one had ever caught me when I fell. I funded my retirement, paid my own health insurance, supported 2 employees through a slow year, and kept 6 months of payroll untouched because people depended on me. In my family, however, responsibility did not make my needs more legitimate. It made them easier to erase. 2 days later, an automated email from Westbridge reached my business address. Ethan had entered my name as a potential family sponsor on a financial planning form. The form did not obligate me to pay, but it proved the celebration had been organized around a decision made before I entered the room. I contacted the finance office, removed my information, and requested written confirmation that no account, guarantee, or sponsorship could be created in my name. Then I sent that confirmation to my parents and Ethan. None of them replied. Instead, Dad canceled our Sunday call. An aunt said my success meant nothing if I could not lift the next person. Claire left a voicemail warning that my refusal might send Ethan back into a very dark place. They were assigning me responsibility for whatever he chose to do next. For the first time, I noticed how often I had been asked to be the reasonable one. I was expected to absorb rude comments because Ethan was insecure, cover expenses because my parents were tired, and forgive broken promises because holding him accountable would create conflict. Have you ever been labeled the responsible one only because you were single, financially stable, and less likely to make a scene? A week passed. Then Ethan sent an email with the subject line, "Last chance." It contained no apology and no budget. He attached the school's tuition schedule and highlighted the first payment date. Beneath it he wrote, "If I lose this opportunity, everyone will know why." I did not answer. 3 days later, the professor called, and suddenly the money was no longer the ugliest thing my family believed they could take from me. The professor's name was Adrian Cole, director of Westbridge's Venture Lab. He was calling with authorization from the Academic Integrity Office because Ethan's project contained intellectual property and operational data tied to my company. The committee was preserving evidence and verifying authorship before interviewing him. I closed my office door. My fingers felt numb against the phone. Ethan's submission was called Nightbridge, a network of evening child care centers for parents whose ended after ordinary daycare closed. It included site criteria, staffing ratios, licensing assumptions, customer interviews, and a 5-year model. Ethan presented it as 10 months of independent research. The faculty panel ranked it first in his cohort and used it to award his fellowship. For several seconds I could not speak. I locked my office door, then sat because my knees no longer felt reliable. 4 years earlier I had created Second Shift. An urgent care client could not retain medical assistance with young children. So I interviewed shift workers, mapped licensing rules, built staffing schedules, and designed a model for converting vacant pharmacies into secure child care centers open until midnight. I worked after client hours, often until 2 o'clock in the morning. When an investor withdrew, I shelved the concept. I never published it or gave it to Ethan. 8 months earlier, Ethan had borrowed my old laptop after his computer crashed during MBA applications. I created a temporary login and left it at our parents' house. When he returned it, he joked that I had saved his future. I remembered that only when Professor Cole said the original document came from my laptop. "We first thought it was a template issue," he continued. "Then we opened the document properties. The author field listed Paige Sullivan, the company field named my firm, and the creation date preceded Ethan's research by 4 years. Hidden comments still referred to Second Shift, and the spreadsheet carried the same history. Ethan had changed the title, colors, and executive summary, but not the document's lineage. Professor Cole asked whether Ethan had worked for my firm, joined the research, received permission, or collaborated with me. I answered no each time. During faculty review, an accounting professor noticed that Nightbridge used old labor assumptions. A hidden source link led to an archived page on my company's domain, prompting the metadata review. Because Ethan had certified that all research and writing were his, the issue threatened his fellowship, final grade, and place in the program. My first feeling was not satisfaction. It was humiliation. Strangers had read work I considered unfinished and believed my brother had created it. He had stood before professors, accepted praise, and built a professional identity out of nights I had spent alone. If work you created in exhausted invisible hours suddenly appeared beneath someone else's name, would you protect the relationship first or your own reality? I asked Professor Cole to protect data from former clients. He agreed to preserve the files in the review system, and I promised to provide only material establishing authorship. He advised me not to contact Ethan before the school issued notice. The moment we ended the call, Ethan rang. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Then Mom's message appeared in capital letters. "Pick up the phone." Ethan called 4 more times in 11 minutes. He still left no voicemail. That silence told me he was not calling to ask what the professor had found. He already knew. My archive showed a copy of Second Shift exported during the weekend Ethan borrowed my laptop. The device matched his temporary login. I opened the original plan and saw my name in the Properties panel. The site made the theft real. Next to the plan was a note I had written to myself after the investor withdrew. Do not confuse delay with failure. I had forgotten that sentence. Ethan had not. In Knightbridge's public fellowship summary, he had used it as his closing line. The shaking stopped. I saved the access record and called my firm's technology attorney. I was making sure no one could rewrite the next week as another family misunderstanding. My attorney told me to preserve everything and avoid arguing by phone. Facts lose shape in families, she said. I focused on 3 things: who created the plan, who authorized Ethan to take it, and whether he knowingly altered it for academic credit. The version history began with my research notes 4 years earlier and continued through 86 dated revisions. It showed me building the model and writing the risk analysis Ethan later presented. Snorts. A copy was exported through his temporary account. Months later, that branch reappeared as Knightbridge with my title removed. The second answer hurt more. Ethan had emailed that his entrepreneurship module required a venture concept and asked me to give him something strong enough to impress the panel. I offered to review his outline and teach him to build a model but refused to choose his idea, write his plan, or let him submit client work. He never answered. 2 days after my refusal, Mom forwarded Ethan a PDF of Second Shift that I had once sent my parents when I was considering the original investment. Her message read, "Use this. Paige abandoned it and she has plenty of other ideas. Change the name so she doesn't get territorial." Ethan replied, "What if she recognizes the numbers?" Dad entered the thread 11 minutes later. "She won't see the final project unless somebody creates a problem." I read those messages until the screen dimmed. Mom remembered how hard I had worked and had listened when the investor withdrew. Yet to her, my disappointment did not make the work mine. It made the work available. I remembered the Saturday I had offered to help Ethan. I had cleared my calendar, prepared a blank forecasting template, and bought the coffee he liked. He never arrived. Mom later said he felt judged by the idea of being taught by his sister. Now I understood that he had not rejected my help. He had rejected the part where help required effort, and Mom had protected him from that discomfort by handing him the finished answer. The third answer came from a freelancer's instruction sheet. Ethan wrote, "Keep the unit economics. Say I interviewed 412 local parents. We don't have time for interviews, so build percentages that support demand." He also asked for my company name to be removed and the origin made impossible to trace. He had knowingly hidden the source and added false data. I sent those 3 items to Professor Cole with a statement confirming I had authorized no academic use. I excluded family insults, tuition messages, and unpaid debts. The truth was strong enough without decoration. Before pressing submit, I stared at the authorization box for nearly 10 minutes. One click could change Ethan's life, but the change had started when he uploaded the plan, not when I documented it. I signed my name and sent the record. That evening, the school notified Ethan of an authorship review and froze the fellowship funds. He tried me from 4 numbers. Mom sent, "Pick up the phone," 6 times. Dad wrote, "We need to agree on a family version before outsiders decide what happened." I responded once by email. "I will not discuss evidence by phone. Preserve all files and messages. I will attend any formal meeting arranged by Westbridge." Mom replied within a minute. "Formal meeting? This is your brother, not a criminal case. If I cooperated, Ethan could lose the program and my parents might never forgive me. If I stayed quiet, the school would reward a lie and every honest student would pay for it. I wanted peace. I no longer believed silence would buy it." Westbridge scheduled an authorship conference for Tuesday. Ethan called the plan a family-developed concept and brought our parents as witnesses. Claire came as his support person. Aunt Mara asked to attend after hearing I was using the school to punish Ethan over tuition. The integrity officer admitted them only after everyone signed a confidentiality. The night before I wrote 2 sentences on a card. Answer only what you know. Do not rescue anyone from silence. I kept it in my coat pocket. I knew Ethan's greatest advantage had never been evidence. It was the family's instinct to fill every uncomfortable pause with an excuse for him. Before the meeting, Mom whispered by voicemail, "You don't have to lie. Just don't be so exact." Ethan said the school did not care who typed first, then offered to name me as an advisor and bring me into Knightbridge when investors came. He was offering me a minor role in the business he stole from me. I almost called back to scream. Instead, I replayed Mom's email and remembered why I had refused. I wanted Ethan to stand behind his own work. By stealing mine, he had turned that boundary into evidence. On Tuesday morning, I entered Westbridge carrying one thin folder. Ethan arrived with both parents, his girlfriend, and my aunt. He smiled when he saw I had no laptop. He mistook the absence of a performance for the absence of proof. The conference room had no stage, audience, or screen waiting for me to expose Ethan. Professor Cole sat beside Dr. Nia Patel, Westbridge's academic integrity officer. Dr. Patel said this was a fact-finding interview, not a final hearing, and warned that altering records after notice could become a separate violation. Mom held Ethan's hand. Claire sat against his shoulder. Aunt Mara chose the chair beside me, without looking at me. Then Professor Cole opened the original file and asked the question my family had spent a week avoiding. "Mr. Sullivan, why does the earliest version of your final project identify Paige Sullivan as the author?" Ethan said my laptop had been a shared family computer, so my name appeared automatically. Asked why the file existed 4 years before he borrowed it, he claimed we had discussed the concept for years, and I created an early shell. "Describe that conversation," Professor Cole said. Ethan glanced at Mom. "We talked about working parents needing child care." "Where?" "At home several clears throat times." "What did you contribute to the model?" Ethan shifted in his chair. "The vision." Professor Cole asked why the staffing formula used a blended ratio when state rules varied by age. Ethan cited industry standards but could not name the ages. Asked why sites were limited to former pharmacies of a certain size. He said they were affordable. Asked what made smaller storefronts costlier to convert. He stared at the table. I knew those pharmacies already had consultation rooms, ventilation, plumbing, and parking that reduced renovation costs. I had measured 14 sites. Ethan had changed the logo without learning why the numbers existed. Professor Cole turned to me. "Miss Sullivan, can you answer?" I explained the staffing model, renovation assumptions, and retention problem that inspired the research. This was not a contest to prove I was smarter. It was a test of whether the work had a history and I had lived it. Professor Cole asked Ethan to identify the one assumption he had changed after his supposed interviews. Ethan spoke vaguely about pricing. The plan, however, used the exact tuition bands from my original model, down to a discounted rate I had created for overnight hospital staff. Snorts. He could not explain why that discount existed. I could. The client's highest turnover occurred on rotating night shifts, and the discount was designed with its benefits department. Every answer led back to a decision I had recorded years before Ethan entered Westbridge. Ethan interrupted. "Of course she knows it." I consulted her. Dr. Patel requested proof of that consultation. Ethan opened his laptop. A notification flashed on her screen. "Stop." Ethan froze. The preserved project folder had registered an attempted deletion from Ethan's account. He blamed a wrong link. Dr. Patel reminded him of her warning. Professor Cole no longer sounded curious. He sounded disappointed. "You did not open a consultation note," he said. "You attempted to remove the source archive." Mom leaned forward. "He's nervous. You're treating him like he's dangerous." Professor Cole looked at her. "I'm treating him like a graduate student responsible for his actions." My parents had explained Ethan through stress, potential, and bad timing. The professor asked only what he had done. I slid Dr. Patel the version history. She read the sequence aloud. Creation. 86 revisions under my account. Export through Ethan's login. Renaming. Removal of my company details, and submission. Ethan said the export proved permission. The log showed access through the temporary laptop account with no transfer message, invitation, or license. Professor Cole asked Ethan why he had not cited me. "Because it was family work," Ethan said. "Families don't invoice each other for ideas." Dr. Patel read my offer to teach Ethan, my refusal to let him submit my work, and Mom's response. "Use this." Paige abandoned it. Changed the name so she doesn't get territorial. Dad stared at the wall when his reply followed. She won't see the final project unless somebody creates a problem. Hearing the words aloud was worse than finding them alone. Mom had not misunderstood my boundary. She had planned around it. Dad had not been passively unaware. He had counted on my absence. I pressed the card in my pocket and let their silence remain theirs. Aunt Mara turned toward my parents. You told us Ethan earned the project himself. Dad called it a misunderstanding. No, she said. You wanted us to pressure Paige. She moved her chair fully beside mine, the first relative to cross the room in my direction. Claire asked if Ethan had claimed the childcare interviews as his. He cited additional market validation, but said the platform had deleted all 412 raw responses. My final document was the freelancer's instruction sheet. Dr. Snorts Patel read Ethan's request to invent percentages and preserve my economics. Claire had helped rehearse his presentation. Now she asked, was any part of that story true? Ethan did not answer her. He looked at me instead. You couldn't stand that I finally had something, he said. You already have a company, money, your perfect independent life. I had one chance to be taken seriously, and you needed everyone to know the idea started with you. There it was. My work became less mine because I had other accomplishments. His need became ownership. He was furious that the plan could still identify me. Mom asked me to call the concept family property. Dad urged the school not to destroy Ethan over a file. Professor Cole said integrity was not a family negotiation. Ethan submitted another person's work, concealed its origin, fabricated research, certified it as original, and tried to delete evidence. Claire stood. Ethan reached for her wrist, but she stepped back before he touched it. You used Paige's work to get the fellowship, she said. Then you used my belief in you to sell it. She picked up her bag and left without raising her voice. The door had barely closed when Ethan's expression changed. He said Claire was dramatic, the fellowship committee was elitist, and I had manipulated everyone because I knew how to sound professional. Then he demanded compensation for the months he had spent improving second shift. Even after exposure, he tried to turn the theft into labor I owed him for. Professor Cole asked whether replacing a name and fabricating respondents were the improvements he meant. Ethan had no answer. Ethan shoved his chair into the wall, accused me of ruining his relationship, and threatened that the school would regret humiliating him. Dr. Patel ended the interview. Pending review, the fellowship remained frozen, the project ungraded, system access restricted, and the deletion referred to the disciplinary panel. Mom whispered that I could still fix it. I looked at Ethan and the 3 documents. I didn't come to ruin his future. I came because all of you tried to build it out of work you stole from mine. No one followed me when I left. For once, they were too busy facing the person they had protected. In the elevator, I finally released the card from my fist. Its edges had cut small red lines into my palm. I felt no victory, only the strange relief of leaving a room without carrying everyone else's version of what had happened. The decision arrived 19 days later. Westbridge found Ethan responsible for plagiarism, fabrication, Snorts, scholarship misrepresentation, and interference with a review. His fellowship was rescinded, the project failed, and he was dismissed from the MBA. He could seek readmission only after 3 years, and future applications required disclosure. There was no secret blacklist, but there was a documented decision he could not honestly omit. Because Ethan had tied his life to the credential, the consequences spread. His graduate housing ended, a consulting firm withdrew an internship requiring good standing, and Westbridge MBA candidate vanished from his LinkedIn. Claire ended their relationship and posted one vague sentence about ambition without honesty being performance. She never named him. My parents lost a non-refundable housing deposit and had to repay fellowship money already released. Mom blamed the school, professor, freelancer, and me, never the person who signed the originality statement. For weeks, she called relatives before I could speak to them, describing Ethan as a gifted student crushed by a technicality. But the official decision was specific, and her story weakened whenever anyone asked why a technicality involved invented interviews and an attempted deletion. The social cost did not come from me publishing his record. It came from my parents making public claims that the facts could not support. Aunt Mara apologized, admitting it was easier to believe I was selfish than imagine the celebration was leverage. 2 cousins went silent after seeing the emails. Others said, I should have handled university fraud privately because the offender shared my last name. Ethan called daily, then emailed after I blocked him. If I declared second shift a family project, he offered to admit a citation error. He wanted to trade theft and invented data for a formatting mistake. His final call came from Dad's phone. I answered because Dad had recently undergone a medical test and I thought the call might be about his health. Ethan spoke before I could say hello. Please, he said. Snorts. The confidence from the conference room was gone. Tell them you gave me the plan. You don't have to say when. If you confirm permission, they might reduce it to a citation violation. I'll repay you. I'll work for you for free. I'll sign anything. I asked whether he would also tell the school that the 412 interviews never happened. He was silent, then said, that part can be explained. Even at his lowest point, he was not asking how to tell the truth. He was asking which lie I would carry for him. Part of me wanted to give him one condition: admit everything without bargaining, apologize to the students he beat for the fellowship, and begin again somewhere honest. But that would have turned accountability into another plan I designed for him. If he was going to change, the first step had to be his own. Mom took the phone and said family survived by protecting one another. She reminded me that Ethan had lost Claire, his apartment, his internship, and 3 years of his career. Hasn't he paid enough? She asked. I told her consequences were not a bill I controlled. Then I said, I would not submit a false statement, would not fund an appeal, and would discuss the matter only in writing. I hung up and blocked Dad's number too, until he emailed me directly about his medical results. The silence did not feel triumphant. I grieved the parents I thought I had and the brother I kept expecting to become accountable. But grief was cleaner than confusion. The school's decision made the facts impossible to edit. Ethan appealed, calling second shift abandoned family property and the deletion accidental. The panel upheld every finding. He moved home and took a temporary insurance customer service job. Mom called him between programs. Meanwhile, I reopened the original second shift folder. Not because Ethan had made the idea valuable, but because defending it reminded me why I had created it. I contacted the urgent care executive who had inspired the research and learned that staffing shortages had become worse. She introduced me to a hospital network searching for evening child care options. For the first time in 4 years, the plan was no longer an archived disappointment. It was mine again, and I could decide what happened to it. I hired an independent research team, disclosed the history to my attorney, and rebuilt every assumption from current evidence. Reclaiming the idea did not erase what Ethan had done. It kept his theft from becoming the final chapter of my work. 6 months later, Second Shift opened its first pilot center in a renovated pharmacy near 2 hospitals. We started with 42 licensed spaces, evening meals, secure transportation partnerships, and hours built around real shift schedules. I did not use Ethan's fabricated survey. My team conducted new interviews, updated every wage assumption, and rebuilt the financial model with current data. The pilot filled most of its spaces before opening day, and a second location entered planning the following month. At the opening, one of my employees asked whether I wanted a photograph beside the original business plan. I said no. The plan was not sacred because my name appeared in its metadata. It mattered because real people could test it, challenge it, and improve it with permission. Ownership did not mean sealing an idea away. It meant having the right to decide how it was shared. Ethan was still living with our parents and working temporary shifts. He had stopped calling me, but I heard through Aunt Mara that Mom had begun criticizing him for not trying hard enough. The irony did not feel satisfying. It showed me that her protection had never been unconditional love. It lasted only while someone else could absorb the cost. Once the money, excuses, and rescue plans ran out, Ethan had to live beside the expectations they had helped him avoid. He could still rebuild. Dismissal was serious, not a life sentence. He could work, repay what he owed, study honestly, and apply again when eligible. What I could not do was manufacture that growth for him. Saving him from every consequence had never moved him forward. It had only taught him to search for the next person willing to stand between him and reality. Dad eventually asked to meet me alone. He apologized for the email and admitted that he had known Ethan copied something, though he claimed he did not understand how much. I told him the amount was not the point. He had known enough to hope I would never see it. We did not repair our relationship in one conversation. I stopped pretending an apology erased a choice and he stopped asking me to pretend nothing had happened. That was the most honest relationship we had ever had. Mom never apologized. She sent a birthday card saying she hoped I would choose family again. I returned no argument, only a short note. I chose not to lie. The distance that followed was your choice. Ethan sent one final email after photos of the second shift opening appeared in a local business journal. He wrote, "So you got everything anyway." That sentence confirmed he still believed success was a limited object I had withheld from him. He could not see the difference between building something and taking it, or between losing an opportunity and being denied one. I did not answer. I stood inside the news center one evening and watched a nurse pick up her sleeping daughter after a 12-hour shift. That moment belonged to the years of research, the failed investment, the honest rebuild, and the people who trusted us. It did not belong to the family story Ethan had tried to write over mine. For the first time I understood that refusing him had not made me cold. It had ended a system in which my competence was treated as communal property, and his choices were treated as communal emergencies. They taught me that family meant giving without conditions. I learned that family does not include the right to steal someone else's labor, identity, or future. I did not refuse to fund my brother because I wanted him to fail. I refused because love is not tuition, silence is not loyalty, and forgiveness is not permission to repeat the harm. When Ethan asked me to save his MBA, he was never asking for a second chance. He was asking me to pay for a plan he had stolen and then lie about who created it. My answer was no both times. If you were in my place, would you stay silent to keep your family or tell the truth even if telling it meant losing them? Thank you for staying with the story until the end. Everything in this video is fictional and made only for dramatic entertainment and educational reflection. We hope you might see that there's strength in refusing to carry responsibility for someone else's repeated choices. You can have compassion without becoming the place where the consequences disappear.